Welcome to a deep dive. We're going to be looking at, it's hard to describe, honestly. We're going to be looking at writings from Anatoly Kolodenko. Um, a real interesting character, we'll say that.
Interesting is one word for it.
You can say that again. We're talking articles, we're talking book excerpts, we even have part of a potential screenplay.
Yeah, it's quite the collection. I mean, you really get a sense that Anatoly has an eye for the unusual.
Yeah, to say the least. I mean, I read somewhere that he was called a jaded journalist. I think jaded might be putting it lightly after reading through all of this.
Well, he definitely has a unique way of looking at the world, that's for sure.
Yeah, he does. He really does. But you know what I find interesting? It's not just the sheer number of ideas he comes up with. It's like there is something, a thread that connects a lot of them together.
It's true. When you dig into it, you start to see recurring themes. You can tell that he's fascinated by human psychology, how we make decisions, what motivates us.
Especially when it comes to business and buying things, right?
Right, exactly. He seems particularly interested in, the psychology of consumerism, the ways in which companies and marketers tap into our desires, even our anxieties, to sell us things.
You can definitely see that in some of the marketing schemes he proposes. Honestly, some of them sound like something out of a cartoon.
I know, right? Like they're so outlandish, so over the top, but that's part of what makes them so fascinating. He's really good at highlighting those vulnerabilities that we all have as consumers. How susceptible we are to a good story or a clever gimmick or that fear of missing out.
It's so true. He's got this way of holding up a mirror to society and being like, look at yourselves. Aren't you a little ridiculous? But here's the thing, and you kind of touched on this already, but he doesn't come across as preachy or judgmental. There's this underlying humor to his writing, this sense that he's not immune to the very things he's satirizing.
Absolutely. I think that's what makes his work so enjoyable. He's not just pointing fingers, he's in on the joke, which makes his observations all the more insightful.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, so before we really go down the rabbit hole here, should we try to get a clearer picture of Anatoly himself? I mean, who is this guy who comes up with these wild ideas?
Right, because he definitely seems like a character. I mean, even just reading his own words, you get a strong sense of his personality.
Yeah, how would you describe him?
Well, he describes himself as someone who embraces unbridled creativity.
Unbridled creativity.
Unbridled creativity. And, that really shines through in everything he writes. It's clear that he sees the world a bit differently than most. Where others see everyday occurrences, he sees a business opportunity, a marketing ploy, a chance to exploit the absurdity of it all.
I like that. Exploit the absurdity of it all.
Yeah.
It's like he's constantly on the lookout for those untapped niches, those little quirks of human behavior that can be, I don't know, leveraged for profit, or at least a good laugh.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's drawn to the unconventional, the unexpected, and that's what makes exploring his work so interesting. He makes you think differently. He forces you to question your assumptions about, what makes a good business idea or how marketing works.
Yeah, he's kind of a breath of fresh air, in a way, even if some of his ideas are a little out there. So you ready to dive into some of these eyebrow-raising schemes of his?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so let's talk about these marketing schemes. One that really stood out to me, and I don't even know where to begin, is this idea of paying people to walk around with $100 bills stuck to their foreheads. Like what?
I know, right? It sounds totally bonkers.
Yeah, it sounds totally
But
bonkers.
when you actually read his explanation, it's still pretty out there, but you can start to see how his mind works.
So how does this one work? What is the thought process here?
So Anatoly suggests you put a message on the back of the bill, right on the back of the $100 bill, and it directs people to a business. Could be anything. But he's banking on the fact that if you see someone walking around with a $100 bill stuck to their head, you're going to say something about it.
Yeah, good luck not staring.
Exactly. It's this bizarre, attention-grabbing thing, and it's going to spark conversations. It plays on our curiosity.
But wouldn't people just, I don't know, try to take the money?
Maybe, probably. But
But-
even if they do, he's saying that's part of the intrigue. Even a failed attempt at grabbing the money creates a story, right?
No, I see. So it's like that old saying, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Exactly. And he even suggests that the business owner could stage an attempt to get the money back from one of these forehead bill people. Crazy, right? But again, it gets people talking. And the more outlandish it is, the more memorable it becomes. I mean, love it or hate it, you've got to admit the guy knows how to get attention.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's one way to get people talking about your business. What else does he have up his sleeve?
Well, he takes this idea of creating a spectacle even further with his whole nightclub rescue idea.
This is the one with the actors, right?
Yeah, so picture this. He says you hire a bunch of actors to stage a dramatic rescue near the nightclub. And then, of course, the rescuers just conveniently bring the victims right to the club.
Wait, he's talking about faking a rescue.
I know, it seems a little extreme even for him, right?
Yeah, it seems like it could backfire pretty badly.
For sure. But again, he's trying to highlight this idea that a good story, something unexpected, something that makes people feel like they're in the know, that's powerful, it creates this fear of missing out.
FOMO.
Yeah.
I guess that is a big driver for people, especially these days.
Right. So even though the actual execution of this particular idea might be a little out there, the underlying principle, I think, is worth considering. Like, how can you create that buzz, that sense of intrigue that makes people want to come see what you're all about?
It's funny because he's talking about these really outlandish examples, but I feel like you see these principles at work all the time. Like flash mob marketing was a big thing for a while, right?
Yeah, totally. Or those limited time offers, get it before it's gone, that kind of thing.
It's all about tapping into that sense of urgency, that feeling that you're going to miss out on something special if you don't act now.
Exactly. And Anatolia was talking about this stuff like years ago. He was ahead of his time in a lot of ways.
So it's not just about being shocking or weird for the sake of it. There's a method to the madness.
Yeah.
He's trying to get at something deeper about human psychology and how we respond to these kinds of stimuli.
Absolutely. He understood that we're more likely to remember something, anything really, if it triggers an emotional response in us. Good, bad, it doesn't really matter.
So, okay, those are some of his more out there ideas. But he also has some that are surprisingly practical. Like, I was really intrigued by his supermarket of love concept.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to our modern desire to have everything curated for us, even our romantic relationships.
So tell me more about this supermarket of love. What exactly is he proposing? So it's like a matchmaking service, but instead of browsing profiles online, you're actually browsing people.
Exactly. He describes it as like a physical space where singles can browse profiles that are arranged by demographics. Age, occupation, interests, that sort of thing.
Interesting. So you're not just like randomly bumping into people. There's some thought put into who you might be compatible with.
Right. And he actually mentions that something like this already exists.
Really?
Yeah. In Beijing, there's a place called, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, the Supermarket of Love. I mean, it's not exactly how Anatoly describes it, but it's a dedicated space for single people to meet.
That's wild. It's like he has his finger on the pulse of these like emerging trends.
He really does. Even if he does tend to take things to the extreme. But, sometimes that's what it takes to get people thinking differently.
For sure. It's like that VIP discount card idea we were talking about earlier. Like, it's a simple concept, but it makes you think, why hasn't anyone done this before?
Right. It's about seeing those opportunities that are right in front of us, those needs that aren't being met.
Exactly. And he's full of ideas like that. What was the one? Oh, the one about the fallen leaves.
Oh, right. Collecting fallen leaves and selling them as fuel. It sounds crazy, but...
But he mentions that there's a company in Britain that's already doing it.
Right. And apparently they're doing quite well, so it's not as far-fetched as it sounds.
It's like he's saying, don't dismiss something just because it sounds strange. Look deeper. There might be something there, something valuable.
It's all about perspective, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, it's not just the business ideas that are interesting. It's also like the way he weaves in these observations about society and relationships and even his own, like, anxieties.
Yeah, he's surprisingly candid in some of his writing. You really get a sense of, like, his inner world. Like that bit he wrote about being a salesperson.
Well, that one again? Remind me.
Oh, he was talking about how one of the only perks of the job is, and I'm quoting here, the constant human contact. Which, when you think about it, is kind of sad.
Yeah, it's like he's craving those genuine connections in a world that can feel very transactional.
Totally. And it shows that he's not just like this cold, calculating business mind. There's a real person there with real emotions.
For sure. It's that humanity that makes his writing so relatable, even when he's talking about these crazy ideas.
Exactly. And he doesn't shy away from social commentary either. Like, he makes this really pointed remark about the fashion industry, talking about how there's always, like, a secret Chinese sweatshop behind those designer labels.
Yeah, he doesn't pull any punches.
He wants us to think about the consequences of our choices.
Yeah.
As consumers, but also just as people.
That's a good point. He's definitely not afraid to ask the tough questions. So, I guess if we're going to wrap this up, and I feel like we could talk about Anatolia's ideas all day,
For sure.
what would you say, like, is the big takeaway here? What's the message that Anatolia's trying to get across?
I think it's about seeing the world with fresh eyes. Like challenging those assumptions that we all have and looking for the possibilities that are hiding in plain sight.
Like he does with everything.
Yeah.
Business, marketing, even just everyday life.
Exactly. He's encouraging us to tap into our own creativity to find those sparks of inspiration in the most unexpected places.
To find our inner Anatoly.
Exactly.
Look for those unusual business opportunities no matter how strange they might seem.
Who knows? You might just surprise yourself with what you come up with.
Well said. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We'll see you next time.